Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Thank you all so much for making the trip out in a cold, wet, and windy morning. How's everyone feeling today? Oh, yeah, no, that good. Need more coffee in the system. So my name's John Carr. I'm a manager at Facebook in the SMB Ireland team. And so I just wanted to kick off by saying welcome. Welcome to Facebook. Welcome to Facebook's EMEA headquarters. It's great to see everyone here. It's so important to see startups and SMBs learning from each other. And that's why today is such an amazing event and such a great opportunity to learn how to scale your company, how to fundraise, because startups and SMBs really are the future of the Irish economy. So as I say, a fantastic day of learning ahead for everyone. At Facebook, we're really starting to build out our team and trying to put on more events like this and host more events and partner with great partners like Dublin BIC so that people can learn and grow and scale. Will really contribute to the Irish economy. So without further ado, I'd like to pass you over to Connor here to kick off today's events. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Morning. If I said the number 1,000 to you, what would you think? Money. Of course you would, Steve. Yeah. Or you might think about the kilogram. You know, they changed the metric unit of measurement of kilogram on Friday. Actually, I was looking at a report last night, a note in Silicon Republic, and they said there's over 1,000 startups in Dublin at the moment, and Tech Ireland, as part of Startup Week, had published this report. So there's 1,190 startups in Ireland, in Dublin at the moment, which shows that it's quite a healthy and vibrant ecosystem. And as part of that, they were kind of saying that 115 of those companies have raised more than €1 million so far. So there's a lot of activity happening, there's a lot of money available, and what we're trying to do here with you this morning is explore some of those funding and scaling opportunities. We're really tight for time, so we're going to have to move fast, we're going to have to move our agenda around a little bit from the one that you saw. But what we want to explore is, and the question you put to us, we did a survey after the last event, and the question you put to us was, where can I find money if I'm an early stage startup? And where can I find money and who would I talk to if I was thinking about scaling my business? And we're going to explore both of those this morning with you. We need to move, as I said, so what I'm going to do without further ado is move on, maybe ask Michael Culligan, who runs Dublin BIC, and Ronan Percival from Forest to come up, because Ronan has an appointment, he has to leave us quickly. We're going to move around, we'll get back on track. But Ronan, if you could join us, and Michael, if you could come up, and let's get started, and we'll have your discussion, and then we'll get back on again. Okay, thanks guys.
Ronan. Good morning, Ronan, and very welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
We're just changing the agenda around a small little bit to facilitate Ronan. Before we kick off, perhaps, Ronan, it's always maybe nice to get to know the person behind the business. So maybe just a little bit about your own background before you got to Forest, which I know you got to pretty early in your journey.
So I was always involved in kind of startups when I was in college. I went to Trinity here about 20 years ago. And
looking well for it.
Yeah. And did a couple of startups there with a few guys. Some of them who've gone on to do sort of bigger things, actually. Like there's a guy called Dylan Collins and Sean Blanchfield.
Dylan, yeah.
And we co-founded something called Demonware when we were in Trinity. But I left pretty early on, so I can't claim any credit for that at all. But and then so I was always kind of knew I was going to do startups. Even though I was studying law, but I didn't. I knew I wasn't going to do that.
Indeed, we remember Demonware, which was a very successful company. One of the things that I saw in your background and you've spoken about before, I guess, is you started out really by working for a short period as a receptionist in a hair salon, and the infectious nature of that industry and how that has. What I'd like you to talk to us a little bit about, I suppose, is I think a lot of entrepreneurial journeys are underpinned by passion, and the energy and the experience you had from that has really informed, to a large degree, the Forest journey and its values.
Yeah, it's really unexpected, to be honest. Yeah, so one of the things, so when I left Demonware, Demonware was really early on, and we were about a year out of college, and when that raised money, and I left to start my own thing, and we thought we were going to help small businesses generally with appointment reminders to cut down on no-shows. So any small business, so dentist, doctor, anyone like that. And so I ended up actually working we didn't have any money and we hadn't raised any money, so I needed a job.
Yes.
So I took a job in a salon because
Good on you.
I thought that they would also be able to be a good example of where they could use no-shows.
Yeah.
And it was a kind of business I'd never walked in. I'd never been in a salon before. Like I'd been in a barber or something, but I'd never. So it was an introduction to a world that I never knew. And so I worked reception for about 6 months, and it was amazing world. Yeah, like it's one of these special businesses where when you're in a salon, people come in looking forward to coming in, and they leave feeling even better than they did before they came in. And there's actually not many businesses that do that, and it's really hard not to. Well, it's
what are you all laughing at?
Yeah. It's hard not to get caught up in that. Like so, when you're like I'd worked say as a youngster like in a spa for a year,
Yes.
and it's a similar job in that you're behind a desk and you're serving customers, but the day would really drag. Whereas like in this, even though I was doing that all day, the day just flew by. And you know, so
And you had
I kind of knew that I could work in this area for a long time after
and
that.
And then the little bridge probably was you had the eureka moment where you convinced the salon owner to allow you to send out a text in January, and you
that was so,
maybe share that a little bit.
So we basically what we did I was working there, and then we put in our software that just took appointments and let the salon do no shows, and that's all or appointment reminders, and that's all it did. But it came to January, and January in the salons are the worst time of year. So they're really busy in the run up to Christmas, and then in January they're dead. And so they panic, as every small business does, as we used to do as well during our quiet period. So and so what we did was we collected all these phone numbers for the no-shows. So we decided to send out, like this sounds really basic now, you know what I mean? But we decided to send out a promotion to all those numbers. And it was actually the very first text promotion anywhere in the world. In a salon industry, and we sent that out just on the off chance we might get some business for the owner, and the phones didn't stop ringing for about 3 weeks. But then it got quite successful, and a lot of salons did it, so we used to get quite a lot of complaints from people. They blame us because all the texts they were getting.
But essentially that was the start of the business.
That was how it started.
That informed it. So obviously, you know, we don't have too much time this morning. You started out originally way back in 2004, but moving on then, jumping ahead, you raised funding much later then in 2011 and 13 from a range of sources, including from
Angels.
HBAN to private, from Boole and Bloom, the syndicates, and also from Enterprise Ireland and from AIB. You've spoken a lot about the value that you've got from the, I suppose, investors you had on board. My kind of question, I guess, on behalf of the entrepreneurs in the audience is, how conscious, if at all, were you in seeking out, investors that could add value? And talk to that a little bit, perhaps.
Yeah, like we took a different route. Like say, the route that I'd been exposed to early on was Demonware, which was more about raising money from VCs and going on that path. And we didn't want to do that, so it's just like a sort of an alternative. There is alternatives out there to build a big business that don't involve, raising lots of rounds of funding. And so we bootstrapped the company for 7 years, and then we realized that we could do it with some amount of funding. Then we'd maybe a turnover about €1 million, and so we went out and we talked to a lot of people, and there was an angel syndicate called HBAN, which many people know, and Enterprise Ireland and AIBC Capital Fund. But so the main investors there were the angels, and they've like a bunch of them have brought a huge amount of advice to Forest, and one of them, Pat, he's on here, he's our chairman, he's been our chairman since 2011. And so that kind of, we were trying to build it on our own with no advice. So having like experienced people on the board made a big difference. Were you
conscious of that, or is that something that more emerged for you? Because I think a lot of people, when they're raising funding, are so conscious to get the funding they mightn't think of the value add.
In hindsight, I recommend it. But at the time it was we just wanted the money, and people would tell us they'd add value, but you wouldn't necessarily believe it.
And as you say, we'll get a chance to talk to Pat a little later in the follow-on panel. Maybe to move on a little bit then, and linking on from the aforementioned angels and others, obviously when they bring their money on board, they do look for an exit. You were very conscious of that. And in the last year, it's been well documented publicly in the media. You've taken on a round of funding from SGE in the States of about 20 million, and that facilitated Angels to exit. But I guess for a very strong return, about 10x. But the part I wanted to explore with you this morning, Ronan, is, after the exiting, you've spoken a lot about building a long-term, a company of real value for the longer term.
Yeah.
So did you forensically seek out this evergreen, let's say, investment type of partner?
Yeah, just to explain really quickly, So like the idea, the way some entrepreneurs are kind of, let's say we call them serial entrepreneurs or whatever, and I would consider myself the opposite to that. My interest is kind of building one business for my career, and seeing how far that can take that. And so that doesn't always fit the investor model, in that investors need to make returns every 5 to 7 years, whatever. So we needed to find someone who was willing to invest for us potentially 10 or 20 years, and it wouldn't break their financial model. So it took us about a year to find someone, and we ended up finding 2 funds actually that did it, and we got to choose between the 2 of them.
Excellent.
But it certainly took us a long time, and I got lucky in the end that the guys that we invested in actually approached us, because it's hard to find people out there, but it's good to know. I think it's good to share with people. People aren't always aware there are funds out there that will invest for like literally the long term. 10 or 20 years.
And Ronan, maybe you might share a little bit with the audience, because people will know of you to a degree, but I mean, you're now up to a couple of hundred people, and just talk a little bit about the scale of what you have now achieved, and I know you're only at the end of the beginning with your plans.
So with Forest, we're still helping salons grow their business, but the product now is more of a platform that does nearly everything for the salon, from their point of sale, their bookings, all their marketing tools, their social media tools, their email campaigns. It does kind of everything the salon needs to do to run and grow their business, because a small business like that doesn't want to have multiple tools the way a company like ours would. They kind of want to deal with one provider. So, it's scaled now to about 5,000 salons around the world.
Wow.
We'd have, say in Ireland, for example, 80% of salons would use Forest. In the UK, about 30%. And then it's grown really rapidly in Germany, in the US, and in Australia now. So we're kind of looking, it's very much about scaling up in those countries the next couple of years.
And those are really, really obviously serious markets. So just out of curiosity, when you mentioned the States there, are the challenges of growing the business in the States very different? And can you do that broadly from here?
So we've done it from here up till now. And I'd say it's taken us a long time. We've been about 4 years trying to get going in the US, and only in the last year have we been starting to make traction, I'd say. And would we have made traction quicker if we'd gone over there? Probably. So what we did was we did it all from here. We did all the support from here, and we had 1 or 2 people on the ground, like salespeople over there, but mainly it was done from Dublin. So it took a long time, and now we have an office in Philadelphia. Our head of sales is moving over there in January, so we're starting to really scale up the business over there. But we have laid the groundwork. So we've probably got about a $2 million business now in the US. Before we've done that, so from that point of view, we're kind of.
So in many ways, your approach is maybe not dissimilar to what you did here.
It didn't require a lot of investment, I suppose, because we had to do it out of our own resources. So from that point of view, we're probably lucky that now that we've managed to do it. But it's definitely hard. It's going much faster, I'd say, in Germany and Australia, actually.
Interesting.
So we've kind of we're probably a little bit more mature, and kind of have figured out how to enter a market better. And each time you do that, you get a bit better at figuring it out, what the challenges are.
Okay.
So that's
Emma, you keep me posted on timing, as to how we're doing. And folks, we'll come in for some questions now in a couple of minutes, please. So maybe just bear that in mind a little bit. Maybe just to broaden out a little bit further from Forest, then, like you're most unusual in terms of your clarity of thought as an entrepreneur, in for the long haul, etc. But you are very participative and supportive of startup and scale-up industry, and you talk at a lot of events, and you were extremely good to make yourself available this morning, in a very, very, very busy schedule. I'm curious on your observations on Ireland Inc., as a place for startups and scale-ups, and how you think we're doing, and compared to what you see around the world. Any observations in that regard?
Yeah, like we do seem to be one of the better places. I would say, like, it's interesting even with salons in the US at the moment. There's two kind of businesses that are doing really well with them, and one of them is Pointy, and one of them is Forest, and they're both, you know. And people say, "Oh, have you heard of these guys, Pointy?" when we're over there, and they're like down the road. But yeah, so it's. I think we do pretty well. The supports that we had with Enterprise Ireland and HBAN, and then even Dublin, or what used to be Dublin Business Centre, I can't remember what it's called now. But but we've got a lot of support at that stage early on, which isn't available, and it doesn't seem to be as available in other countries. So I think from that point of view, and then the fact that we have to go abroad early, like, makes a big difference. And places like Israel and Ireland, I think, benefit from that. You know what I mean? They don't have that local market, and you see companies in France and Germany that we're competing against now. They've been much more insular, so we're coming in with something that's international, at an international standard, and they're much more at a local standard.
You've already exported.
And it's much easier to compete against them.
And your challenges now, as you've grown the company, you're up to 200 people or thereabouts, talent acquisition and all such like.
Yeah, that's really hard. And I'd say, to be honest with you, that's really hard in Ireland. And like the Irish boom has been driven a lot by companies like Facebook and Google and all these guys. So that's been fantastic for the country.
Yes.
But it's definitely made it harder to scale a team here now. Is that particularly for a lot of types of roles? You know, well, obviously all the ones that everyone knows about, like software development and everything like that. But if you're talking about customer success and support and things like that, it's very, very difficult to be able to do that in Dublin. So there are challenges, but they're challenges that are born out of success. So, you know,
good challenges.
You can't have everything, I suppose.
Yeah, very good, Ronan. So we're going to go to the floor actually now. If we have a mic and halfway down, I think we might have a roving mic as well. Is there anybody with a question for Ronan? And as I'm looking down, by the way, it's great to see such fantastic numbers here with the morning there is outside. Anyone with questions there? Don't be shy, put your hand up if we have. If not, I'll come back to you in a moment if there's anybody. I do want to ask you maybe on behalf of the audience then a little bit. No free lunch here, Ronan. So we're always looking for some sort of gold nuggets or maybe a bit of common sense, really. If you were to, I suppose, you know, go back to the start, what is there anything that you've learned on the journey that you wish in particular that you knew when you started out? Might be helpful for people here.
Yeah, like I think the biggest thing, and like with biggest thing that affected us probably very early on, and I know I see it affecting other people, and it is well documented, but it's, even though it's well documented, people still do it, and we would have fallen into the same trap, is that especially if you're serving, like, not a customer face, not a direct to consumer business, but when it comes to like a direct to, you know, a B2B business of some description, is to get out and start getting paid as fast as possible, even if what you're getting paid for isn't, you know, what you dream your product should be. The faster somebody's actually paying for you, I don't mean using the product, I mean paying you for the product. The faster you actually get real feedback on how to improve, and like,
so put some
I
price
think that's
on
the
it.
most I would say every business I've ever been involved with or worked with, and our own one, that is the single. That's when, if you're not doing it and suddenly you're getting paid, the learnings go up at an order of magnitude higher. So the quicker you can start that, the better.
It's great input, because I guess if you're dealing with companies, sometimes you'll have enthusiasts in there who might take your product on, but them, if they're not paying for it, might never be going
anywhere. They don't want to. If
you
just ask for the payment, if they say no, then you know they don't really care about it. So you might as well move on instead of spending a year. It's like some people can spend a year working with a company, and it's such a waste, I think. You know,
so a quick no if appropriate. Right, folks, I'm going to give you another chance. Is there anyone that wants to ask Ronan? John, have we a mic here? Have we a roving mic? Or? Actually, John, I'm just going to ask you to stand at the mic if we haven't got a roving one here, so people can hear you, the question. We just stand out in the corridor, or there's a mic halfway down there. Oh, yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah, it's just so the people in the audience can hear the question.
Okay, good morning. Ronan, great success story. I'm just wondering, I can understand you hitting the American market early. Why the German market?
Well, because Germany, Austria and Switzerland is about 100 million people, and it's in Europe. So it's probably the biggest market in Europe. And it's also a wealthy market as well, as in one of the richest areas of Europe. So that would be one of the main reasons. And then the second reason when we looked at it was actually all the companies doing what we do there were all German. There was no international companies. So they were actually a good bit behind what we were offering. So they're the two main reasons that we thought we'd go in. So.
And actually, we'll take one more question now in a moment. And traditionally, I mean, I'm so delighted to see you making fantastic progress in Germany, because if you go back the years, you look at Irish companies, they export to the UK, to Australia, to Canada, maybe the US, but Germany is a market that Irish companies traditionally have found very hard to crack.
And we would have been put off it, doing it for years, because we would have presumed that it would be too hard. But it was actually, so.
Great. I think there's one more, is there? Yeah. Great.
Ronan, could you just say a few words about how you grew your management team? Were there co-founders with you, or did you attract people as you grew, and how did you define the roles for them individually?
Yeah, so we have a phrase in Forest which was actually coined by our chairman, called "We grow our own timber." So basically, the idea behind that is that we traditionally, anyway, we try to grow our own people into leadership. So most of the exec team are actually people who've been with the company for 5 or 10 years. What we're now finding is, and those guys have grown tremendously, and we're, including myself, we're all learning on the job. So the company's kind of been built around that concept, and it's great for other people, who are joining Forest to see that, because they can see that the same thing will apply to them. But I would say now we're starting to get to the point where certain new roles that maybe wouldn't have existed before, like we wouldn't have a head of HR or something like that. So that's something we need to bring in from the outside, that kind of thing. So we're trying to recruit for that kind of talent now, and that's a whole different challenge that we've never done before, and can't say that we're doing great at it yet, but we're going to keep going.
Okay, we take one final question. They're all we're getting lots of them now. Yeah, please, and we're going to wrap it then because of time. I think just to keep on schedule.
2 quick questions, maybe. So one question is just around obviously your US entry. Obviously MindBody are a big player there.
Yeah.
But they cover obviously a number of different verticals. How did you approach that, and how did you displace those guys? Was it your tighter focus on salons, or
so MindBody their main market is yoga and Pilates, and they kind of have 90% of that market. So salon is something that they've sort of adapted their product to.
Okay.
And even though the salon industry is bigger than the one that they're in, so their product offering just isn't built from the ground up for salons. So we would take a lot of clients from them.
Okay.
And even though obviously they have much bigger sales teams than us and all that kind of thing, so they've won a lot of the market. But we're finding it, in every market we go into, there's already players. Like it's not greenfield. We're not taking people from pen and paper. We're taking people from other systems. So that's kind of the way we operate everywhere. So yeah.
And the other question I had then obviously was just around, we seem to be getting pretty good at this. Obviously you guys are doing salons, you've got Glowfox doing gyms, you've got Flipdish doing kind of online takeaways and
restaurants, yeah.
What makes us so good at actually kind of this, I suppose, conquering the long tail and selling into these SMEs and pairing them with some sort of kind of cloud play?
Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point. It's just because when we were starting out, there was all the success stories in Ireland tended to be enterprise software companies selling to telecoms or fintech and different things like that. So there is kind of a couple of companies now, like you say, who are targeting SMBs. I actually don't know why, but so I can't say why. But it's building a little bit of momentum, though, definitely, because like Connor and Glowfox would be a good friend, and the guys in Flipdish as well. So we share a lot of learnings and stuff like that. So it's building a little bit of there's learnings that we can share that we can't really share with a lot of other startups because they're not doing small businesses.
Yeah, actually,
so it is building. Yeah.
We had Connor sitting here on one of our previous funding and scaling events as well. I'm going to wrap it there, folks. And in doing so, I just want to observe, Ronan, that we see lots of entrepreneurs, and what's been amazing in observing you and meeting you a number of years ago and watching the journey is just this quite steely determination to build a serious business for the long term. And I know from observing you, and I know you've had great help from Pat Garvey and others, that you're only at the end of the beginning of what is a phenomenal journey, already employing 200 people. You're so understated, no hype, you just get on with doing it. And I think the lessons for entrepreneurs are multifold from you. We wish you the very, very best with the next stage of it. And thanks very much for coming in this morning.
Thanks very much, Michael. Yeah, cheers.
Thanks, Ronan. Well done. Okay.
We're going to. Yep.
panel, I think, now. Thanks, Conor.
I have to lift my chairs up as well. Exercise this morning for me. Okay, so if I could just invite our panel to come up then. So we have Terry from Enterprise Ireland, we've Dave from the Leo, we have Andrea from Swoop, and Lucas, you're going to join us too, and we're going to have a quick discussion, so thank you. Just while the guys are setting themselves up, a little bit of housekeeping. Somebody dropped their parking ticket. So if it's yours, you've won the lucky ticket. Come see me after and I'll give it back to you. It's here. Super. Guys, thanks for coming in this morning on this miserable morning, and great to see you all again. Maybe I could kick off and just ask you to give us a quick introduction, who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Andrea Reynolds. I'm founder and CEO of Swoop Funding. We're a fintech. Basically, it's a one-stop money shop for SMEs looking to raise or save money. We cover the entire funding landscape from debt, equity, and grants. And we're live here in Ireland and the UK. We've also joined the Open Banking Sandbox, which is the 9 major UK banks have included us in their program where they have built an API. So we've developed against all of the banks so SMEs can integrate their bank account, and we can analyze that account usage and identify savings and credit products that are available to them.
Thanks. You're unique. You're a HPSU client and you're also a funder.
Correct.
So you're kind of unique.
Yes.
Thank you. Lucas.
Hi, my name is Lucas. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called CoinDrum. I'll actually have a chance to talk in a minute. But in a sentence, we basically turn your leftover coins into vouchers for duty-free in the airport environment. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Thank you. Dave.
Hi, everyone. Dave Connolly, Business Advisor with the Local Enterprise Office in Dublin City. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Local Enterprise Offices, there's 31 of us, all connected to a local authority. So we deal with companies that are turnover less than 2 million and less than 10 employees typically.
Thank you. And finally, Terry, thank you.
Hello, my name is Terry Smith. I'm the manager of the early stage startup department in Enterprise Ireland. We focus mainly on companies that have export potential. So in terms of, differing from the local enterprise office, startups that would come into my department are ones which, have maybe innovation, have potential internationalization, and have potential to scale and grow. And just to let everyone know, there's members from our advisory team here today, so there's an opportunity to talk to us after the event.
Yeah, so we've networking outside, and the Enterprise Ireland team will be out there. There's a pop-up, so do go and say hello to them. Terry tells me they have loads of money, which is great, so make sure to talk to them. I might just start with you, if I may. So at the early stage, I'm getting ready. I'm looking to raise early stage funds. I'm going to come across somewhere between Dave and yourself. Maybe just explain how I would find you. What do I need to do to get ready to come and have a chat with you?
Okay, well, as everyone will appreciate, there's lots of different types of companies, and I think it's important to understand whether you're maybe more appropriate for the local enterprise office as your starting point, or Enterprise Ireland. And I think in general, at the very early stage where you've got maybe an idea for a new business, or you're at the early stage of scoping out your opportunity, it's good maybe to go initially to your local enterprise office, and that they can give you that early stage support, the start your own business support. I know they do primary grants as well and that type of thing. So that early advice, it's good to go to your local enterprise office. From an Enterprise Ireland perspective, there are opportunities where there is maybe innovation associated with the opportunity, or if you have a product or service that you have a sense that will kind of grow from an export potential quite early on, it's worth getting in touch with Enterprise Ireland. And just to let you know as well that what we do is, there are times when very early stage companies would come to Enterprise Ireland and may not be ready for us. So what we can do is we can refer to the appropriate local enterprise offices as well. So what we do is we get initial information in from a company, and to get a sense of, okay, where in that startup journey are you? And if it's a company that has maybe done the initial market research, has a prototype developed, and is at a stage where they've gone to customers and got some feedback and positive feedback, that may be a stage where we're ready to take you in as a start client. So it does vary, and it depends on the company type. But I think the point worth highlighting as well is that we do refer between Enterprise Ireland and the Leos, and just to be sure to either knock on either door, and we'll make sure we point you in the right direction.
Thanks, Terry. We're going to come back around again, Dave, and continue on the Irish. But the UK scene, Andrea, we'll hear a lot, and we have heard a lot about the Irish scene. What's happening over in the UK from an early stage funding perspective?
Yeah, so to kind of reiterate what Ronan was saying, the UK investor market is open to Irish businesses, and the UK angel investor market is open to Irish businesses. So similar to the EIIS scheme here in Ireland, they have the SEIS and EIS scheme in the UK, and we've raised both. We've combined the best of Ireland and the best of the UK, and it just opens the options available to you. So businesses can raise under this scheme as long as they have a branch or some form of presence. So if you are going to enter the UK market in any shape or form over the next 3 years, you can actually get your advanced assurance there. So we raised under that, and your funds flow back to your Irish headco. So they also love Irish businesses because, like Ronan was saying, Irish businesses are getting much more support at the early stages. So they're a lot more mature, have thought about what their routes to market are. And Enterprise Ireland has normally put them through the ringer, or Dublin BIC, or somebody has put them through the ringer. So the UK investor market, the sentiment it is that Irish businesses are much more investor ready and much more mature in their outlook than what they see as their peers at the same stage in the UK. So I would say, open your horizons and understand that you can bring that together with your Enterprise Ireland or your HBAN investors. So we've Irish angel investors, Enterprise Ireland, and UK angel investors as well.
On the platform.
Yeah.
Super. Dave, maybe you could give me some specifics just in terms of if I'm at an early stage, I want to start that fundraising journey. What are the tangible things I need to do? Yeah. And what are the sort of funds that are available at that really early point in the journey?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, I think Ronan has kind of alluded to it, is either getting that yes or no very early on. And we would perceive ourselves as enabling you to either get the yes, no, or maybe so. So the primary, our initial goal is really to fund you to pop your head above the parapet, to see what's going on in terms of an MVP, to go out there and get your market research, to get boots onto the ground. So that's really our first stage of funding. So it's kind of a match funding. So it's kind of for every €2 you put in, we'll put one back. So it's kind of 50% towards building a minimum viable product. Generally, turnaround time on that is about 6 to 8 months. And we're then looking to see, and we're assessing after that has happened, is it a case of going into this business full-time and supporting you to transition into the business full-time, or to make that first initial hire? So it's proving that kind of concept and then progressing into employment either as yourself or somebody else. And again, it's doing all of that without taking any equity in the business. So it's really supporting you for the Enterprise Ireland rounds later on, or indeed moving on to the likes of a Dublin BIC.
And the entry process to come to you looks like what?
Yeah, the entry process is really to meet with a business advisor like myself. It's to sit down and plan a schedule of 12, 18 months to see where the business is going to go. It's to set goals together. Applications are generally 6 to 8 weeks. So that's how quick a turnaround time we are. And we're tight on that in terms of, we know that there's a short turnaround time in terms of getting this idea and that little gap that's there, and getting that kind of opportunity that you perceive is there. So it's really to engage with the local enterprise office, to engage with your business advisor, to put an application together for funding. And that's really what the initial kind of engagement is.
Thanks, Dave. Lucas, you were with the Leo. It's a good number of years back. I think I first met you around 2012 or 2013, but you were there. What was your early journey like? And we're going to do it in a bit more detail when we sit down with you later on, but what was your early journey like in terms of that funding process?
So we're actually about 6 years into the journey now, so I think we might slightly predate the Leos. So I was actually Enterprise Ireland pretty much from day one. So back then you would get, as a first step, I guess, the feasibility grant, which meant you could spend up to 30,000 and get up to 15,000 of that reimbursed. No strings attached really, as long as the expenditure was relevant, of course. So that's a good starting point with, trade shows or building a prototype or, things like that. So I didn't have the Leos at the time, I'm afraid.
So for you then, that early stage, using that early money, what did it allow you to do? What did you use it for?
Well, my first money in was actually private money. So we have taken EI money at some point along the journey,
Yeah.
but we didn't do the 50K for 10% or any of that. So my founding investor was a very relevant party. He's the founder of Ryanair, Declan Ryan. So that was the first money in, and obviously when we had the opportunity to take essentially the same money from somebody like that, that was preferable to us. So
that's how you
started.
use the matching.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we used that to, in our case, I mean, I'll have to talk about the business in a minute, but to put together the technology, it was a tricky thing for us. We're in the hardware space. We essentially had to come up with a robot from scratch, which was a hard thing to do. So we used the money for that and then to, buy us some time to sign our first client.
Very good. Terry, Andrea mentioned investor ready and this notion of getting investor ready. So what does that mean from an Enterprise Ireland perspective? What are you looking for when a client comes to you? Maybe you've built a prototype, you've developed an MVP. What stage am I coming to talk to you, and what do you want me to have ready when I come to you?
Okay, I think it's important, in terms of investor readiness, in a situation where maybe you need to raise, 300,000 or 400,000 to get to the next stage. It's important to have your business plan that is, I suppose, well scoped out. So the market validation is there. It's very, very clear what the opportunity is. You've got, solid feedback on the competition. You understand the competitive landscape, and evidence that you've got feedback from customers. And I think ideally as well, if there's a product being tried or a service being tried with a customer is important. So I wouldn't underestimate the importance of that market validation. Also, information I think on the management team. So ideally there's more than one person involved at the stage where you're looking for investment. Because what investors and ourselves will be looking for is that there's an experienced team there that if it's a highly technical product, that you've got someone technical on board, and also that the financial side of things has been thought through. Because often in the past, I think I've seen business plans where companies may be going to investors with a particular business plan, and it's not really highlighting what the investor needs to understand. And I think as well it's important to put yourselves in the shoes of an investor or Enterprise Ireland and think, okay, why would someone part with hundreds of thousands to support my business? So I think it's important to be prepared to understand the requirements of an investor, and in particular, having the evidence there that there's likely to be good traction in the market for your product.
Okay, and from your side, Andrea, you mentioned investor ready. What does that mean from your perspective for the platform?
Yeah, so a good deck, a good strong deck, 10 to 12 slides, not very much on it, but to the point and really honing your proposition with all the points that Terry has covered, and actually, understanding your financials and understanding the terms, being able to talk their talk is pretty much it. But same thing, as long as you've got MVP, some level of market traction, and that's the point where the angel investor market starts to kick in the UK.
So that notion of traction, customers, revenue you're generating?
Yeah, even if it's tiny. It's that, as Ronan was saying, it's anything showing that someone will part with some form of cash for your proposition. Yeah.
Okay, very good. I think we're coming up on time. So maybe if I could ask just each of you, maybe just a piece of advice from your perspective in terms of, for the room, I'm getting ready, I'm at an early stage, I'm looking to start raising funds. What's the key thing, the takeaway I need to take from today?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the landscape, understand what's out there. I know Ronan made the point earlier on as well that there's funds there that people don't realise. So, use the likes of the local enterprise offices, mentors, Enterprise Ireland to maybe access the investment community. And I think also in terms of access to customers, we're there to help, link you to potential customers as well and get reference sites. So, it's reaching out, and I think it's also making sure that, you're broadening the scope of your team and getting good advice, and potentially in terms of looking for investors to get smart investors, so someone who's going to add value as well.
Okay. Before I come to Dave, if anyone wants a question, I'll hear from Dave, and then you can kind of step up here and we can take a question from the panel. They will be staying around. They'll be available for conversations outside afterwards. But if there is a pressing question, you might get ready for that. Dave,
so
closing thoughts?
Maybe two. I suppose for me, the first thing is I would consider that there's no linear progression. It can shape any which way for a business. So the two kind of things that we really hone in on is certainly, and Terry's mentioned it, is building your team. So if you're one person, look for that kind of champion that can partner quite well with you. The second thing as well is, I think Dublin, as Ronan has mentioned in his closing comments earlier, Dublin's well equipped in terms of networks, so tap into those. People in the industry and in the kind of startup sphere are very open to helping, sharing and offering guidance to you as a startup. So definitely get out there, talk to people and kind of get that feedback.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you because I'm going to ask you to stay with me and have a conversation. So Andrea,
pretty
advice?
much what the guys were saying, I would say there is a lot of options out there. I would utilize every single support that the Leos, you guys, Enterprise Ireland have to offer. I'd also say one pattern that I notice with Irish companies is so many don't claim R&D tax credits. And that is an absolute must in your blend of cash to, well, especially when you're bootstrapping, to get you to the next stage. And every time I ask a business, oh, what's your R&D tax claim looking like? Oh, I haven't claimed it. Which there's also products out there, IP finance products out there, which will give you lending based on your R&D tax credit claim. So for so many reasons, add that into your blend of cash to get you to the next stage.
Fantastic. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask for the panel? No, we'll move on. The panel will be outside for discussions afterwards, but I'm going to say thank you to our panel, ask Lucas to stay with me, and we're going to have a quick chat with him in terms of his journey so far. So thank you guys, and thank you for coming in this morning. You stay there. That's okay, Dave. We'll leave that there. It's fine. Thanks. So thanks for coming in, Lucas.
Thank you.
And joining us this morning. It's great to see you again. I think I was saying I met you sometime around 2012, 2013, and you were at a very early stage.
Correct.
But maybe before we start, tell me a little bit about you. There's something in your past, Michael was reminding me about an ad from your youth. Remind me about an ad you made when you were young.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I tried to find it and I couldn't because we would have it up here. Anyway, sorry,
gosh.
move on.
Well, you're probably referring to the I am German, as you can tell by the accent, and when I still lived in Germany up to the age of 15 or so, I was acting in a German childhood TV series. But since then, I went to boarding school in London and then university in London as well, and did my MBA here in Dublin. Always had entrepreneurship in my blood, and at the time, obviously, the deadline was looming as to either take a corporate job, which I really didn't want to do, or start a company. So pressure was on to come up with an idea that I would believe in strongly enough to make it my full-time gig. And that's about the time I landed on the concept of CoinDrum, which ever since I've been working on full-time.
So explain a little bit about CoinDrum. You were driving through a toll bridge when the idea hit you. Tell us all about it.
So, I mean, the story goes like, I came from the airport. I had a bunch of different, because I was commuting between the UK and Ireland a lot, so I had euro coins and sterling coins in my pocket, and I drove up to the motorway toll station where you throw coins into one of those machines to make the barrier go up. And that was kind of the aha moment to say, I want a machine like this in the airport where all my leftover travel treadmill coins, I could just throw them into the machine and get some kind of value for it. And that was the starting idea. It then evolved to, well, let's install a self-service machine in the duty-free environment where you can drop all your leftover coins into it, which the foreign exchange companies won't take. And in return, the machine will count it all up and print you a voucher to be spent in duty-free. Now, as a kicker, we actually give you 10% more. So whatever you put in, we add 10% to it and give you a voucher then to spend it in duty-free. So if you throw €5 in, you get a €5.50 voucher, you walk into duty-free, you buy whatever you love. So now we solved your coin inconvenience. So we keep them out of your coin jars, never to be used again. And we created a new customer for duty-free, which turns out is the key success metric, footfall penetration. What percentage of travelers can we get to start shopping in our stores? So once we raised that set 50K and we had put together the technology, we put one into Dublin Airport. And one of the key insights we learned was that when people get on average a €5-6 voucher, which is what people carry on average in their wallets, they walk into duty-free and there's very little you can buy for €5-6. So they end up spending on average 10 times what the vouchers are worth. So a €5 voucher will lead to a 50 or 60 euro sale. And that's the point when we were in business, because now to the industry, we had an absolute no-brainer.
Proven metrics, you're going to drive footfall, you're going to drive revenue.
So that's exactly the thing. So we took that money, that check to prove that concept, and like nobody could have predicted that. Nobody thought there would be an uplift effect at all, you know. So once we had that metric, we went back to the well and we raised more money. We wanted to raise €1 million, and within 4 weeks we had 2 million in offers. So we took that money largely because of the people that were offering it to us. So our founding investor, Declan Ryan of Ryanair fame. Followed up again, but then we had my chairperson now, Bobby Healy, who started Cardtrawler, Tom Kennedy, who started Hostelworld, and the list goes on. So it was all like this amazing people who had built travel tech success stories in my space, who now help me out beyond the money. So.
Fantastic. Go back a little bit and describe the early stage of the journey, because you brought on Declan very early. How did that come about? You had Frank Roach from our parish was on your board. He was your chair, I think, for a while, or he was on your board and an advisor.
Still on my board since day one. He was my lecturer at the time
in UCD.
That's right. Correct. So Declan Ryan. So when I had the idea, the first thing I did is I locked myself in a room. I wrote the business plan. It's actually a bit of an old-fashioned thing to do now, I believe, business plans. But at the time, like, it helped me to write it out once and make sure that I have everything addressed, and just for clarity in my own mind, really, And once I had that written out, I entered the Island Fund's business plan competition. These days, there's a million different competitions. At the time, that was the one that was available to me. So still being a student, I pitched it there to an audience for the first time, the idea. And I won it on the day, which was great. It came with a 10K prize, which allowed me to, make that commitment that I'd work full-time on it straight away. But most importantly, one of the judges on the day was Declan Ryan. So he saw the winning pitch, invited me to his office the next day, and we made a handshake deal for an angel check. He gave me a desk in his office next to him, and for the next 2-3 years, I kind of spent as his protege in the Alendi office. Yeah.
And has been supportive and has been on the journey. And
absolutely. We just, till today, we've just started a joint venture together between his investment vehicle and CoinDrum, 50-50, and to do what we do here in the Latin American market, because he has an airline in Colombia now. So all the way we've been doing this together. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So describe the process. So getting Declan on is a huge help, and somebody of that caliber. But describe the process of coming up with the hardware. And I recall at the time trying to get the first airline or the first airport across the line. How long did that all take, that journey?
Technology is hard, but you can get that done. The tricky thing, especially in the airport space, was to get your first customer, because it's a matter of credibility. And I already had the luxury, and that's one piece of advice that I would give to people on day one. It costs you nothing but enthusiasm and effort to attract the best possible team, because that gives you industry experience. Sometimes it comes with money, but it also lends credibility to your project, and that's fundamentally the thing you're lacking when you're trying to sign your first customer, especially if that customer is as big as an airport, where often you have government shareholders, tender processes. Those guys are not in the space of innovating, really. They have a winning model for them, and it's a hard one to crack. So that's the bit that took a long time. Once we had the first one and we had data, I basically transitioned from being a student with a PowerPoint and an idea to look at these numbers and tell me what you want to do, and that was the game changer.
But that took what? I recall it was about 18 months for your first airport, and then how did it kind of ramp up after that?
Probably more. Now we're in 10 airports in 7 countries. The last one being Dubai International. We kind of had to, the first machine we installed was in Knock Airport West, so 2 flights a day leaving. But it doesn't really matter, though, because at the end of the day, A, you have a flag on the map, but B, you have metrics which you can easily extrapolate for then a 20 million passenger airport, which is Dublin Airport, and that's not a big leap to make people to ask. So we had to kind of break from that tier airport into the Dublin kind of medium tier, and now Dubai International being the top tier with 80, 100 million people a year. Since then, of course, we're still entrepreneurs at heart. Since we launched in Dubai, we started to look a little bit left and right, and really by popular demand, people kept asking us, well, where can we use the service? Because I'm not flying, but I have my coin jar at home. Banks won't take it. And we so systematically got these requests that we basically did a trial and put one of our units into a local super value. And slightly different model. You can put in your piggy bank, essentially, get a voucher to spend it in the store. And the thing is so crazy busy, it outperforms quite a few of our airports. So that's now a big part of the excitement on what we are doing, going after this more conventional grocery retail sector, just because the sales cycle is very quick, the market size is incredibly large, and commercially the units are very attractive, and seems to be a real need for it in people,
And it's more difficult, arguably it's more difficult developing a hardware play than a software play.
Yeah.
What did you find along the journey?
It's become a bit more fashionable since when I started, hardware was a no-go for anyone looking to invest money. That's changed a little bit since then. It is a self-service machine, but to be honest, we've become very good at that. There's upside to it as well, because our business, we have a relatively small team, 5 full-time employees, but we can look after a very large international footprint with a small team, because it's essentially business in a box. We are printing vouchers right now in Dubai International as well as Shannon, and nobody has to be there. It's just when I sleep, it prints vouchers. So there's a lot to be said for it. It's also essentially a vending model where we don't actually have to stock the machines with anything. What I give you is a piece of paper, which is negligible value. So usually in vending, the issue is you have to go and refill snacks, and that's where the real cost lies. I don't have any of that. I take people's money and I give them a piece of paper, and that's my involvement in it.
But you have the back end process. You need to get the coins out of that machine. You need to recycle them. You need to kind of strike the deals with the airports in terms of each of the retailers.
Yeah, I mean, the coins is actually not a hard thing at all. There's companies who do this for a living. G4S brings the cash and transit businesses who also get the same contract to take the money out of a Coke machine. There's no real difference to do the same for us. So that's easily solved. And quite often, frankly, the retailer pays for their coin supply in the morning. So sometimes they just want the coin. So now they don't have to pay for it. They have a free supply out of the unit. So we let the situation dictate what makes sense there. So that's not really a problem. It is, however, tricky to deal with the long sales cycles in airports. One lesson we've learned there in the early days, we were trying to sell the airport, the duty-free company, and ourselves, so kind of a three-party contract. We've learned the painful way that we should really only talk to duty-free, because the duty-free people already have footprint in the airport. They are private sector as opposed to government shareholders, etc., which makes them more commercially minded, and therefore, numbers is where we shine, and it's an easier sell. We only have to convince one party, and it's also more scalable. They already have footprint in the airport, and there's basically 10 duty-free companies in the world which own the space. So one duty-free player could sign a contract for 200 airports, whereas airport authorities are very fragmented. If I sell an airport authority, I get to start all over with the next airport authority. Duty-free is more scalable.
So you're going now direct to the duty-frees?
Absolutely.
And there's a single duty-free operator in each airport, or there's multiple?
Well, there'd be one key concession, the typical tobacco, whiskey, perfume, that kind of stuff, yeah.
So it sits inside in their outlet?
Absolutely. I mean, there's one company, Dufree, which, cheap capital went on a buying spree, and 1 out of every 4 duty-free sales on the planet are done by this one business.
So you get them?
Well, we have them in Milan. So so the idea is to basically do one project with them, in our case in Milan, take the numbers to the CEO and say, look, it helps, drive your sales by X amount per year. It's only half a square meter, but it's a whole new reason for people to start shopping. So you give me half a square meter of space, I make every other square meter of your space more profitable. And that logic is very strong for them. And if you have hundreds of airports, then
fantastic. Tell us where the business is at the moment in terms of your people, the size you're at, the number of airports. What stage are you at now?
Well, 10 airports, 7 countries. Now a big part of the focus right now is this retail vertical. As I say, the sales cycle is so short, and you have these companies, whereas somebody like Dufree can sign hundreds of airports, like Lidl has 10,000 stores in Europe, and we could make good money for them in every single one. So right now that's again we've got the entrepreneurial bug again, and it's same technology but slightly different model and just a different market. So we're doing some learning there. One of the things we've done is we've added a very large 42-inch video promotion screen to the top of the machine. Turns out that is worth a lot of money to brands to advertise their products in the retail space at point of sale. So now we've sort of diversified our income streams from the machine, and it helps subsidize the coin operation. So we're trying these cool things which are bearing fruits right now. So we're just hoping, building on the success we had with SuperValue here, as well with a foreign exchange chain in the high street, both of which have really taken off. So we're just looking to copy-paste more of that now. It's a real second side to the business, which I predict fairly soon is going to rival the airport side.
And that supermarket rollout is here in Ireland, but that again can roll out around Europe.
We're looking for salespeople right now in Germany for similar reasons as previously alluded to here. Obviously, I'm German, so that might help a little bit. But Italy, Spain, all these heavily large markets, very cash-reliant societies. Most of them Ireland, frankly. Yeah, we basically look at ATMs. How many ATMs are in the market, and that's a very good proxy for us to see for X amount of ATMs there should be X amount of coin drums. Yet in Germany, there isn't a single one that offers this service. So that's hopefully going to be us.
Fantastic. I'll take a question if anyone has a question for Lucas at this stage, if anyone would like to ask. If not, I'll keep on going. A question? Yeah, maybe you'll step down to the mic because we won't be able to hear you. And we're streaming this live on Facebook. So maybe just step down to the middle of the floor and ask it. No? You're okay. Good. Anyone else like to ask a question there? No, we'll move on. So, Lucas, what does the future hold for you? We're just coming to the end. What does the future hold for you?
European expansion. Step 1, so we're looking for salespeople in those respective markets. Any good retail contacts in the room, lucas.decker@coindrum.com. Other than that, the joint venture that I mentioned in Latin America, so specifically that retail vertical, we're looking to do it with headquarters in Medellin and Colombia, and then go after that region as well.
Okay, world domination.
That's it. Very good. Nothing less.
Tell me, the supports you received along the way, and think about your audience here who are starting businesses or a couple of years behind you in the journey.
Yeah.
What do they need to look out for? Where should they be going? What's your learnings from the journey thus far?
Yeah, I mean, on day one, obviously, every aspect of the business is a challenge because you're operating off zero resources, and everything that a business needs is still a challenge, right? So it's really a matter of priorities, and people sometimes falsely conclude that cash is the answer to everything and getting funded straight away. I think if I would put team on the top of that list. If you have the right co-founder or founding team, or even at board level, if you have a great idea and a great team pursuing it, cash naturally follows always. So that, and the whole credibility argument, especially at board level, even if you don't have money, those people can get involved without paying them in the early days. In terms of the supports I've received, obviously I started with an angel check straight away, but I have taken some of the feasibility grants from Enterprise Island, which is a great thing to do. Now we're over 5 years old, so we no longer get support from Enterprise Island, sadly, which I'd love to get because we have the international offices from Enterprise Island are actually a great feature which people maybe don't use enough. They have offices in all the different markets which know people locally, etc., and it's a great resource to lean on. But in terms of money, obviously, the LEOs and the EIs of the world can guide you there. Obviously, there's money in the private sector. The EIS scheme makes it very attractive for people to invest in startups. Obviously, there's an equivalent in the UK. There's plenty of people, because if you can get people who are relevant to your space, you can get the advice, the mentoring, the credibility for your business, and the money all in one catch. That's obviously preferable to maybe an Enterprise Island check. So I would definitely make sure that you manage your pipeline well, identify the right people that could write you a check in that space. So talk to enough of them. There's obviously a pipeline effect where you can't just be talking to 2 people. And then momentum is the other thing in fundraising that sometimes the entrepreneurs go wrong. I think there's a lot to be said to momentum when it comes to closing a round. Sometimes people try to close a round for 1.5 years. Obviously, that's not the ideal scenario. If you can relatively quickly get people to commit more and more, there's a certain momentum to it, then people are more likely to write you a check. That's certainly what worked for us when we very quickly, within the space of 4 weeks, closed our funding round.
And I presume as you were doing the funding, you had those metrics, and it goes back to Andrea's point from earlier, that you have some metrics, you have some customers, you have some revenue. That traction piece is really important in terms of showing to people, this is what it looks like. I want your money to scale this, as opposed to I want your money to try it.
Obviously, the more fundable your proposition can be, the better. If the more you can show, and the further you can take it without having to raise money, the more likely you are to actually get money in the end. Doing it on day one just with an idea is obviously a bit harder.
Yeah. And for you then, you raised, you closed that round. You mentioned 2 million. You have a great team and you have a great board around you. Future fundraising as you scale and grow to be decided?
Maybe. Because we're in the hardware space, the key cost was really the capital expenditure of the machines every time we close a deal. My finance guy here in the room has been able to address that for us. So we closed a funding partnership with a leasing company that basically, when we sign a deal, we no longer buy the machines, they buy the machines, and the cash flow of the machine pays off the machine over time, which means I can sign a deal for 10,000 units right now, and it doesn't actually cost me money. Which is a great creative way not to have to pay for machines with pieces of the company, essentially. Couldn't be done on day one. Now we have it, and that's a great asset. So when it comes to finance, there's loads of creative ways to make these things happen.
Very good, very good. Closing questions? Anyone? A question for Lucas? No? Yes? You'll have to step down so we can hear you. Onto the mic. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I actually have a question in regards with your business model. You said that you add 10% each, and where you earn money.
Yeah, I left that out. So, like I say, if you put €5 in, you get a €5.50 voucher. How do we do that? Well, that €5.50 voucher now gets spent €60 at the till in an environment where margins are 60% in duty free. So that's worth a lot of money to the duty free, and in return, they pay me every time that happens. So when I approach a duty free player, I say, look, it doesn't cost you anything. You give me 0.4 square meters of space. I own the machine. It's fully serviced. It's a turnkey solution. And only in the case of success, it's a success fee only. When somebody starts shopping in your shop with a voucher, then you pay me a small fee.
So they'll take a small reduction in margin to give to you to fund this, and in return you're saying, I'll grow your business by this extra.
Exactly, so it's no risk to them. Like worst case scenario, few of those transactions happen, but best case scenario, lots. And
fantastic. Anyone else? Good. Luke, sorry, we have a question there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Same thing. I have a clarification on your business model, what you said at the end in terms of the company. You don't manufacture the hardware. My understanding is you have someone else who's doing that for you through leasing. Can you clarify this a little bit more?
So in the early days when I was trying to put this together, I basically found literally that story at the toll payment station. I got out of the car and took a picture of the manufacturer of who makes those machines, right? So all we did essentially take relatively existing technology and put it in a customer-facing self-service solution. We've gone through 2 generations of that, and then with time and when we had the money, we started developing, we learned what the weaknesses are of the existing hardware in the market, and then went to develop this type of technology with additions of a large advertising screen and make it more suitable in terms of accepting multiple currencies. Instead of storing coins in a big bucket, essentially, ours are sorted. Therefore, retailers are able to recycle the coin into their till supply. Loads of things that we have noticed that current solutions don't do. We've learned that on somebody else's time, essentially, in their technology. We've made the improvements and developed it ourselves. So now we own all the IP, which if you're raising money, etc., that's always obviously helpful. And it gives us a real tangible competitive advantage to other people who could potentially look at this space as well.
Fantastic. I'm out of time. Lucas, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Lucas Decker, thank you.
Thanks a million.
So we're going to move on. Michael is going to take us on our second panel discussion. So Michael and the panel, if you could come up and join us, and we'll move on with that straight away. Thank you.
Great, folks. And just as the panel are coming up, Finn and Pat and Peter, just as the guys are coming up, I wanted to give a shout out as well to Startup Week Dublin, which is, some of you will know, is on all this week, supported by Dublin City Council, with Dara and the Leo and Dublin City Council team, and Techstars as well. Gene Murphy and his colleagues are here as well this morning. They have 50 events going on all week, and we're hosting this morning's event as part of that. We've had some inputs from the entrepreneurs a little bit earlier, and there's advice there, perhaps if you can, to get your business to a particular stage before you fundraise. Notwithstanding that, many entrepreneurs consider fundraising to be perhaps one of the most difficult challenges. So in that regard, we've gathered together this morning a panel with a few different perspectives. The angel and private sector perspective from Pat Garvey. Pat was a co-founder of a business called SharpText back in the day, as we say, which was grown to be, it was a computer distribution products business, grown to be one of the largest in Ireland and the UK, and sold to DCC. And he's too modest to say, but it's in the public domain that he would most certainly have been one of Ireland's earliest tech millionaires, and has been a long-term investor in private capital. Finn joins us from Frontline. He had his own startup prior to that, engineering and maths background in Trinity. And Peter O'Mahony joins us nowadays from Linked Finance, but a serial entrepreneur prior to that with the Comedy Club and Stock Exchange board games and such like. So we have a range of perspectives here this morning, and really looking forward to maybe the exchange. Pat, I'm going to kick off with yourself if it's okay.
Yep.
And as I said, you're a long time private investor, including, as was referenced earlier, and we'll pick up later, maybe in a follow-on question later, the forest journey. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted to ask you really is, what changes have you seen in the type of entrepreneurs that are coming to you, and the type of opportunities over the recent times compared to prior here in Ireland?
Yeah, well, I think it's probably a credit to all of you guys, BIC and Enterprise Ireland, and the regional enterprise people, and that I think the people I'm seeing now are very well prepared, and they've got the good basics, they've got the good decks, they've probably worked out what the product market, the right product market mix is, and so they're beyond the kind of just trying to figure out what kind of business they should be in. So I think there are more of them, and they're definitely smarter, and that's a positive. Sometimes I see them and I say, God, I wish he wasn't going into that sector, you know, and yes. Because still I think some of the characteristics of the businesses that people bring are pretty bad, So if I think somebody asked earlier, why did they think Forrest was working, and Glofox and guys like that? Why did they think, well, SMB market is really much easier to scale in, and it's easier to scale in than a lumpy enterprise business where, you know, you're looking at your budget is 4 sales of $500,000 each, and you know, if you only get one, your budget is blown. So I think the characteristics of some of the businesses are still questionable, you know, and you know, for young entrepreneurs who are really starting out, you know, that really just get into the right sector. That's very important.
It's a very interesting observation.
It's
a very interesting observation in watching it, because traditionally we've, you know, favoured B2B businesses in Ireland, and B2C obviously is a bit more challenging because it needs deeper pockets. But I guess the B2B to SMB is perhaps an in-between house a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, all of the research says that you can, you know, and there's plenty of research done on SaaS businesses and how SaaS businesses can scale, and definitely SaaS businesses that are in the SMB sector scale much faster and more efficiently than the bigger ones. You know, and obviously, you know, Ronan talked about it earlier, but for startup business as well, it's critical to have a good, really good business model. You know, and one that, and people come up with good business models, but the essential part of the business model is it must deliver value to the customer. You know, that's, you know, if you're not delivering value to the customer, nobody's going to buy it. And you know, you can talk about recurring revenues, you can talk about pricing models and everything else, but unless you're delivering real value to the customer, you know, you've got a problem.
Yeah, great clarity of thought. Thanks very much, Pat. Maybe Finn, we might move on to yourself. Finn, you'll bring maybe a slightly different lens as a relatively recent graduate and entrepreneur yourself to the to your role now with Frontline in seeking in seeking out, I suppose, investee companies here in Ireland. So what are you seeing in currently in terms of the type of opportunities in the marketplace?
I suppose just to Patrick's point as well, we're definitely seeing a lot of high quality entrepreneurs. We're seeing a lot of high quality entrepreneurs, but also I completely agree with the point about the shape of the companies. Is we track why we pass on every company we look at, and the number one reason is the team isn't right. But the second reason is the market's too small, and we're seeing a lot of Irish entrepreneurs who are focusing on really small markets, and it's been touched on by a few people today. Is you're either, when you have metrics, you're selling the present, but in early stage, so at Frontline I'm looking to put 250,000 euro checks into really early stage businesses, and in that case you're selling the future. And if you're selling a future in a small market, it's really hard to see that upside. And I think that's the balance that a lot of entrepreneurs don't quite get right, is there's a balance of selling where you're at right now versus selling where you think you're going to be in 5 years. And it's in comparison, it's the one thing I've seen where I've spent some time in the UK and London and some time in the US. And Irish entrepreneurs are just as good operators as anyone I've met, either in the US or in the UK. But when it comes to selling the big future, it's just not, there's not quite the same. And I think it's maybe an environment thing where we think about, we want to get it right here, then we'll go somewhere else. But in reality, those guys are like, we're going to get it right everywhere. And when you're selling the future, that's kind of the attitude you want to have.
And do you think that comes from the size of our market, or just listening to you there?
I'm not sure. It's a hard one to pin down because, and I think it's like you want to get it right here first. But I think the problem for a lot of, particularly with B2B SaaS, is Ireland is never a big enough market for it's just never going to be large enough for you to get to scale. So you almost have to start looking at the US or the UK from day one, and that's an attitude I wish you'd see more of, and we are actually seeing more really high quality entrepreneurs are day one. Why aren't we selling in the US? Why aren't we selling in the UK if they have the wherewithal to do that?
Perhaps it's just an evolution in terms of Ireland would be a little bit younger entrepreneurially than somewhere like the States, or for that matter, maybe less so the UK. I think probably just an outcome of that. Perhaps.
I think maybe there's the Dublin Big do a great job of doing shared learnings, but I think just because of the scale of Ireland, you're less likely to meet someone running Ronan's a great example, someone running a 200-person company, while he's an outlier in Dublin, while in London you can go to one event and you meet 10 people in the same kind of situation.
Fair point. Thanks, Finn. Peter, delighted to have you along this morning. I remember meeting you actually at a very, very early stage of your Link Finance journey. You in fact came in and pitched to HBAN at the time, I remember. But you had a very clear view at the time that revolutionizing, I suppose, lending to SMEs. You were an absolute pioneer in the area and obviously have built out now the P2P peer learning platform. Actually, I should have said here an investee. I should have said earlier, Frontline is an investee in Link Finance as well, actually as a VC. But you've built it out now, and you've 18,000 lenders, and you have 1,400 companies that you have lent money to. Maybe for the audience, would you start by giving us an example of a loan on your platform and how the process works? Because, I mean, in recent times, some of the entrepreneurial companies we would have engaged with at Dublin Big who have matured and grown up have availed of your service. And I don't think everybody here would necessarily be aware of that.
Yep. Well, I suppose when we launched in 2013, the banks physically weren't lending to small businesses. And the challenge that we found wasn't actually attracting lenders who wanted to lend on the platform, it was the businesses. So we would regularly meet people who would say, I desperately need 50,000 for my business, but there's no way I'm going on your platform because it's so public. And if you fail to fund me, I'm going to look, I'm going to look like the disaster, not you. So we were constantly pitching people. So it was kind of maybe we kind of felt until we got to loan number 50, nobody actually believed that the business model would work. And the way the business model does work, in case anybody doesn't know it, is we have 18,000 members of the public now who've all signed up and said they want to support small businesses. And then we have a team that do the full due diligence on the companies to credit check them to make sure they're viable and somebody that we think will actually repay a loan. And if you're good enough, which at the moment we get about 150 applications a month, and 50% of them are deemed good enough to go live on the platform. If you go live on the platform now, you'll get funded in a second because our community is so strong and it's so liquid. But back in the day, as Michael would remember, we would kind of run a 20,000 euro loan, and it might take 2 weeks to fill it just because we didn't have that element of liquidity. So as Michael kind of reminded me yesterday, in the early days, we were doing one 20,000 euro loan every 2 weeks, where at the moment we do a million a week, and the business is absolutely growing. But I suppose the model is where our competitive advantages over the banks, we're not necessarily cheaper, but we're unbelievably faster. So if you can provide us with the documents, and the only documents we need, it's no business plans, but if you can provide us with 6 months bank statements, which everybody has in a drawer somewhere, and the latest set of filed accounts for your business, we can make a decision. In-house, we make it in 20 minutes, but we'll actually get back to you same business day. So we feel for small businesses, a quick no is as good as a quick yes sometimes, that they actually know exactly where they stand. But we're in a decision to kind of give somebody a green or a red light on the same business day.
And listen, I'm just trying to do the numbers as you're talking there. Is it more like what, 50k average?
It's about 70k average
okay.
loan now, yeah.
Okay.
We lend up to a maximum of 250k. We just changed that to 300k last week because we found for some reason we were just missing a few people by doing that 250.
And just listening to you, when you say did you, and I note from the platform, because on your platform you can see the different companies and how long it took to fill the loan, etc. When you say 1 second, is that because people have already pre-committed that they will invest if there is an automation?
Yeah, we call it auto bid. In the early days, people used to love the excitement. It was an auction.
That's right.
And you could pick the interest rate that you were happy, and the technology was able to decipher who was the cheapest bids and kind of put the loan together that way. Now, we found that wasn't scalable. When we started, people told us it wasn't scalable, and we didn't believe them. But we found that we had to get rid of that, and we had to start pricing the loans ourselves. We price them, and basically a typical lender has auto bid set up where they're saying, I'm prepared to put 500 into any A grade loan, as long as the interest rate is 8.5% or whatever the thing would be.
Super, Peter. Well done. It's just been phenomenal to watch the growth of it. Finn, maybe back to yourself. Any lessons from your own entrepreneurial startup journey that you've been able, how useful has that been in your current role?
Oh yeah, I suppose I realized I knew absolutely nothing about anything at any point in time, like the whole way along. Like really,
every day is a learning day, Finn, for all of us.
Honestly, I sat down in the the way venture funds work is everyone goes out all week, goes sources deals, analyzes deals, and then on Monday you get the whole investment team together and you run through the deals. And I remember sitting in the first partners meeting, and I was like, oh, this is how they think. Oh, okay. I had it completely. I had no idea what was going on, and I think that that lesson of it's fine not to know, it's fine to have no idea what you're doing, as long as you're asking questions along the way. Was I didn't ask. I pitched Frontline for my business, and I met Stephen McIntyre, and I didn't ask the right questions, and I didn't follow up and say, look, why didn't we move forward? And I think in the job I'm doing now is particularly in Ireland, it's important there's a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, and it's much more important I'm slightly more conscious of helping people, like through a pitch, being like, look, this is like a sales call. If you're running a fundraising process, I'm a customer. If I get excited about your business and I want to invest, then suddenly I have to become the salesperson, because there are a lot of investors out there, and the very best companies, you always have to sell why you're a better investor. So it's a bit of a weird situation where in the ideal, it's two salespeople selling to each other. And I never thought about the process like that at all. And I think in terms of working with entrepreneurs and doing stuff with Dublin BIC and doing stuff with early stage companies in EI, that's one of the biggest lessons and things that I've tried to help companies with is treat your fundraising, don't let it drag on, treat it like a sales process. Go out, build your pipeline, qualify your leads, have your stages of progression, and do it in a timeline, because there's again this they're investing, and I've realized this as well, it is a hype game to a certain degree. There are people who are conductors who will hit the right angel, hit the right fund, be at all the right events, and then suddenly you're like, oh, have you heard of that company? Have you heard of that company? Have you heard of that company? And again, as founders, I was out of college, I didn't know anyone really. And that's just another thing, is if something comes up in discussion at a partners meeting and you go, oh, so-and-so told me they're a good guy, so-and-so told me they're a good girl, they're a good operator, that just like steps you above when funds are looking at 200 deals a month. It's those small extra little touch points that brings you up above and gets you to the next stage. Because otherwise I think people look at VC in particular and go, it's a complete black box. How does one company get funded while another doesn't? And it's the marginal stuff. I think that was the thing I didn't understand about it, is you have to treat it like a process and like a science. And that's why second-time entrepreneurs are just so much better at going out and getting funded, is they know how to pull the levers.
So I think actually it's great to hear that, Finn. It positions you very well, I think, to empathise and for people to connect with you in the market, having gone through that recently, been on the accelerators as well. Pat, back to yourself. I in particular wanted to maybe just delve in a little bit on the back of having had Ronan here earlier in your journey with Forest, where obviously you were an angel through Bloom Equity originally, and then we had Boole and Cork, and you became the lead angel, as we say, through HBAN, and later went on to be the chairman of that. I wanted to ask really, I suppose, the lessons that you have learned. I know you've brought enormous value, and Ronan has spoken about that, but we all learn all the time. So the lessons you've learned from that journey that might be of benefit, to the entrepreneurs in the audience.
I think one of the first things that probably Ronan learned is that the term angel investor is a kind of an oxymoron, because when you think of angels, you think of divine, pure, wholesome, innocent even. So look, I think if not just from Ronan with Forest, but since I sold my business some 18 years ago, I decided to kind of reinvent myself and become an investor, and I've invested on my own and together with angels and together with co-investing with VCs. And what do I learn? Well, the thing that differentiates the good guys from the bad guys is the leadership qualities of the CEO. And and for budding entrepreneurs here, I can tell you that's not always an innate quality. A lot of it has to be learned and can be learned. And just like Finn was talking about learning on the job. If you're open to learning and if you're open to really kind of good advice, you can get there as a leader. But I think it was Jack Welch, who was a former kind of CEO of General Electric, tried to define what good leadership was, and he said, you've got to be able to create a vision. So you've got to be able to articulate that and keep articulating that vision, and you've got to own that vision passionately, and then you've got to relentlessly drive towards that vision. And all of those pieces, not everybody has them to begin with, but you'll get there. And in Ronan's case, I think I've enjoyed the journey. He's a guy who has really a voracious appetite for learning. He reads extensively on both business and on management, and I think that's a very key learning point. I mean, the other learning points are sometimes written off as cliches, but they're critical. If you don't have good planning, if you don't have good reporting, timely, accurate, good reporting, these things will. This is a game. This is an adult game. It's not for kids. And if you make a mistake, if you use bad judgment, if you're incompetent, you're out of it. You lose.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And so there are things like that. The other thing I would learn is that, Ronan talked a bit about growing your own timber, but having a good, open, robust questioning culture in the business, and helping develop your own team is a critical thing too, I think.
What's really interesting listening to you, Pat, I suppose, is that in some ways lots has changed, but in other ways, the fundamentals have, and sometimes this gets lost, I think, nowadays, and the modern startup, etc. But the fundamentals of building a great business, as you've outlined there, which Ronan is implementing with your help, have not really changed in many ways.
No, I don't think it has. Maybe I wouldn't like to be seen to be as being old-fashioned. I know I'm older, older than Val, but good management practices are pretty timeless. I think.
Yeah, I'm just kind of conscious of time because Emma's given me the nod here. Peter, just briefly, the trajectory of the evolution of your business model. Just talk about that, and was that a planned thing, because it has changed quite a bit, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, everything about a startup is kind of having a focus on growth. And I suppose, in the early days, we knew for this business that we'd need to raise capital, and we needed to raise a mix of capital. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to have the growth, and people wouldn't trust that the platform was going to survive. So kind of winding back over the last 5 years, I mean, we've raised 5.5 million in equity with Frontline as our only professional VC. Everybody else involved has been an angel investor or kind of friends and family. And we've raised, 110 million in debt. So, it started basically as an idea on a piece of paper, and that's the kind of evolution of it. And the build-up has been, very gradual. It hasn't been that we got a huge amount of money and then put our foot in the gas. It took time because we were trying to build credibility without running out of money.
And you were filling a gap at the time, as you said, but obviously it's changed now with the main banks coming back into lending. So you're probably competing on a slightly different basis now, speed of delivery, customer service, etc. Would that be?
Yeah, I think it'll always be speed. So I mean, the banks have issues. Everyone refers to them as legacy issues, but really the technology. So our head of credit at the moment is the former head of credit in Bank of Ireland. So we know some of the inside problems that they have, and that's a kind of that allows us actually build things very quickly that we realize will actually continue to give us that competitive advantage.
Okay, have we time for a quick question? Yeah. We'll try. Anybody for a question for any of the panel here before we wrap? Anybody at all? We're okay. I think we're good. So we're under a little bit of time pressure. I would like to delve in a little bit more with each of the guys. I want to say a really, really big thanks to Pat Garvey, Finn Murphy, and Peter O'Mahony. Thanks, guys. So, guys, I'll let you go, guys, and we're just going to do a little. I'll close up then. Thanks very much, guys. So if you just stay with us for a moment, folks, we're about to wrap up, and doing so. First of all, to thank both of our panels this morning, and to thank our sponsor, our supporters and sponsors, OBH, Smith & Williamson, and obviously Facebook as well. And just before we finish this morning, I wanted to highlight to you that on each of your seats you should have a brochure which is FutureScope 2019. A number of you in the audience will already be familiar with FutureScope, which is a annual event that we host in the convention centre. Its purpose really is to enable connectivity and collaboration between startups, scale-ups and multinationals. And we're announcing this morning that we're bringing it forward next year, and it's on the 28th of March rather than the usual May timeframe. FutureScope in this event was, I suppose, conceived from observing that we had a lot of events here in Ireland where people who come in from abroad, there'd be a lot of razzmatazz, and then everybody, the day after, there was no continual engagement. So our vision for FutureScope was to enable collaboration, connectivity between startups, scale-ups and multinationals, Irish or international, based here in Ireland. And we do that under a number of different lenses, such as collaboration, entrepreneurship. So on the day you have 4 different stages. You have an entrepreneurial stage, which is really more of what you see here today. You have an innovation stage highlighting the best innovations at play. You have a collaboration stage, so in collaboration between scale-ups and multinationals. And then you have an insight stage, which is looking at the big trends happening internationally and how they're impacting, I suppose, on future opportunities in business. And that's across areas from smart cities to blockchain, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, etc. So it's launched here this morning. Tickets are on sale. The super early bird tickets, as they call them in the industry nowadays, are on sale for €89 from this morning. And a number of you have been at it. And I think the feedback, if you look at FutureScope website from previous years, is superb. I want to thank everybody for coming along this morning. We run these events on a quarterly basis. Please continue to provide us with feedback. It's great to see such numbers here on a really inclement, as an understatement, morning outside. We're just going to finish with a very short video. It's about 90 seconds on FutureScope from last year. Thank you all, folks. FutureScope was set up as a platform to share what's happening in terms of the evolution of new technologies and their impact on business and on society.
Well, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring together the ecosystem. Entrepreneurs, established businesses, thought leaders, bring them together in one forum and give people an opportunity to network, to share and to learn.
Not only individual technologies that are emerging, the speed and scale. And this is what really makes today very, very different.
We need to think about what we want AI to do for us and what we do not want it to do for us. It has power to influence people in ways that people don't even notice.
We are seeing some amazing businesses growing out of basically nothing. I always think if a picture paints 1,000 words, then surely a map must paint 1,000,000. And perhaps in the future, we will actually have a digital twin of the Earth.
FutureScope this year, following on from the Insight stage with Global Perspectives, has an entrepreneurship, collaboration and innovation stage. And we've also added a new creativity meets technology focused on animation.
The beauty of FutureScope is that it's all about collaboration, and smart cities are all about collaboration, and it's about the city working with the big tech companies, startups, research centres, and I think that's what FutureScope is all about. It's bringing together that ecosystem.
What I'd like to do is to announce the 2018 winner of the One to Watch. I would like to congratulate Bespoke Choice.
It's good to see what's going on in Dublin. Also, for me, a lot of the activity happens outside the stages, meeting people.
For the startups in particular, it could be good networking.
Last year, we met one of our investors here. We were on a panel together, we got chatting afterwards, they invited us to the US, and it's been a great way of raising our profile and raising cash.
FutureScope was actually one of the first conferences that we went to try and engage with investors and kind of the broader community of startups. At that event we got an introduction to Eamon Quinn from Dragon's Den, went on to become our lead investor.
FutureScope can't happen without partners, and we're so pleased this year to have Dublin City, Vodafone, Esri and Enterprise Ireland, along with a whole range of others, enabling us to put this in place.
FutureScope 2018 has put a spotlight on what the key emerging technologies are, the impact of these for businesses, and I really believe that people are heading away from FutureScope today with a real sense of what's coming down the track and where the opportunities lie for their businesses into the future.